do.
Howdy. How you doing, dude?
Yeah, I'm good. You?
Yeah, good, thank you. Very good. I've just been out in the garden just before we started. We had a bit of a slow start because technology loves me and Charlie. It really wants the pod to do well.
How many updates just before recording are we on now?
Oh, God. I don't know, but none that'll fix anything that we need. I thought, well, I'll nip out to the garden, try and move a few bits, do a little bit of repotting because I'm a pensioner. Yeah. And now I've got bits of my hair, which I'm sure in glorious HD will show up like the world's worst dandruff.
And if they don't, I'm definitely going to zoom into them. So that's the way I had it. I've still got that snow effect from the Christmas episode, so might have to throw that in.
What have you been up to? You've had a long day in work today.
It wasn't meant to be. I think that's the worst thing about it is that if you know you've got a long day, regardless of what you're up to, you can prepare for it. But when you think you're going in for I've got a few hours, I've got some stuff that I need to square away, it's fine. And then you get, not an onslaught. And it's not necessarily anyone at work's fault, but when it hits, it's like, great. And it was just a long day.
Yeah, I've had quite a busy couple of weeks, which will continue into next week. But hopefully I'll try and book a bit of time off soon and just do some normal days watching more great films like the one we're watching for this episode.
I have watched for this episode.
I don't even know what day it is. Great, good start.
Actually,
that was the point, to break. It's a clue.
So if you hadn't guessed, we're talking about Point Break.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
So the 1991 version, Point Break, or the version, the definitive one. So it was. I'm going to take credit for it as if it was my film. I basically put it out there to watch Point Break. Again, it was like They Live. It popped up on one of the streaming services, and I was like, "Oh, this is a no-brainer. That's definitely going on the list." Anyway. I definitely convinced myself, similar to They Live in a way, that I know this film inside and out. Bollocks. Worse than They Live, I feel like I only ever watched half the movie. Yeah. And then, because it's, Patrick Swayze, Keanu Reeves, it's one of those iconic sort of films, isn't it, really? The stuff that happens here, even the title Point Break sounds cool as fuck. Like, the ex-presidents, there's a lot of cool box ticking going on for that film. Yeah. And I think because it's talked about, or not necessarily recently, but the years afterwards, it's been talked about so much. I just convinced myself that I knew it really well, and I didn't. And it's definitely not the film that I thought it was.
That's one of the things I love about the film. It's so in the zeitgeist for certain elements of the film, and it's been, I wouldn't even say it's been parodied loads, but it's been referenced that much that people have an idea of what the film is. For anyone who doesn't know, how dare you? But it's essentially an undercover FBI agent infiltrating a surfer gang who turn out to be bank robbers who love extreme sports.
Woo!
You're welcome.
Fast and the Furious.
For the premise alone.
Fast and the Furious there.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's from the premise alone, you should know that you're not going to get what's on the surface. I mean, there's a lot of talk now, rightly so, about representation in Hollywood, diversity, of opinions, not just physically look and biological makeup, but, it's always got to be about offering a new perspective. Yeah. This is one of the most well-loved action films and arguably like manly, cool dudes, although, a little bit dated in some aspects, but still cool. Female director, Catherine Bigelow, great director. I mean, she smashes out the park constantly with quite male-orientated films. She's very good at offering a different way to look at that, because she, at multiple times in the film, will almost start to do the cliche thing of cool airhead surfer dudes who are bank robbers, but then she'll she'll make a decision in the direction of the scene, or even in the way it's edited, where it'll just throw you off balance a little bit. The pacing will pick up or drop off, or a character will suddenly buy into a decision or go along with something where you're like, really? I don't know if that's... And it, in the best possible way, you're constantly on edge and questioning things a little bit, and that makes it sound probably way deeper than it really is. But, it's got that slightly off-kilter
I completely
feel.
agree. I think, like I said, it's the 1991 version, but I really did remember it as if it was an 80s film. And we've talked about this many times, and so I'm not going to go on about it, but people have in their mind what each decade looks like. So because I was thinking 80s, I put a lot of things onto that actually nothing to do with the film. So I was thinking it's going to be like, I was going to say Brooklyn Nine-Nine then, but I don't mean that.
More Miami Vice looking.
Yeah, and very sort of pastel colours and like surfing, and like it's all like, on the beach and very chilled out, and like neon colours and stuff, and it's so much darker.
Yeah.
And I think it felt much darker for me watching it because I had, the sort of the juxtaposition between what I thought it was and what it actually was made the gulf between those two styles, or those two feelings, like a lot bigger. Yeah, I've read a lot of stuff online where it talks about, Cameron was the producer of it, and he was looking for a script for his wife to direct. And then the more you think about it, you go, oh, that sounds a bit nepotism.
Yeah.
We weren't there. We don't know what the makeup of that situation was. But regardless, she didn't phone it in.
No, exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
She is an artist as well. At the end of the day, it's not somebody giving their spouse or setting up their spouse up with a job that they have no business doing or no interest. She clearly has a vision. Yeah. It's such a whilst leaning into certain cliches and things, it has such a clear vision. Yeah. That the whole film, we spoke about it outside of the pod recently. We broke our rule when we met up recently, but one of the big things for me that I love is, and this comes down to the writing of it as well, every line of dialogue or every interaction or conversation or bit of action is either set up for something that will happen or will be referenced later in the film, or at the very least, at least pushes the story along or gives you a little bit more of that world. Yeah. And for, again, I'm not just give someone a job to direct this big thing with proper actors. It's like, no, this is a very competent job. Bigelow, she was meant to make films. Yeah. Clearly.
Yeah. There was a lot for any director. I was going to say for her to take on, but that's irrelevant, for a director to take on, the sort of, to get the right pitch and feel within the FBI, within the two very different surfer communities that are involved in it. The relationship between Gary Busey and Keanu Reeves, which I feel like it feels like they could have had a buddy cop movie outside of this.
A whole series.
Yeah.
A whole series of them.
They are great together. I really feel like I'm starting to really get Gary Busey as an actor more than ever.
I know exactly what you mean. There's a certain frenetic energy, like Nick Cage-esque, of a good director, or again, good writer, whoever's a good creator, a good artist will sort of shake that energy up and just, help push him along, or maybe also give him a bit of free rein to say, you're the angry old gristled cop, but it doesn't mean you can't be funny. Yeah. And it doesn't mean you can't push the line with what's PC and what it's like. Just go with what you think is real for this character, because the character he's playing, that's definitely many persons that have existed over the years. Yeah. To be in that line of work, you've got to have a certain bit of gallows humour, and to have been that far into his career at that point, there's a certain grittiness to him, which I think, I know exactly what you mean. This is Gary Busey's perfect role. Oh yeah, definitely. Basically, that's what we're saying. Angry, shouty, but kind of funny older cop. This is the role he was born to play.
I know we've already spoke about it being a film that's definitely in the zeitgeist, but I almost feel like there's a lot of like Mandela effect with it, that people remember scenes back, or like with me, I remember. I convinced myself I'd seen it. But I think when we talked about watching this film, I even said on the pod, oh yeah, the bit where Keanu Reeves is, he's in the sand shooting, rolling. It's like, he's not in the sand. He's in the LA River, the overflow.
The aqueduct,
yeah. It's like, so I don't know how, but in my mind when I said that, I fully could see Keanu Reeves rolling in the sand and not even shooting up, kind of like shooting around, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But I definitely think it falls into that category almost. And I think Swayze's almost playing against, not type, but he is the heartthrob. He's in Dirty Dancing and Ghost and stuff, and and in Ghost, and he is like the cool good guy. He is masculine, he is strong, he is reliable, he's dependable. And in this, it's like he's a fucking psycho. Like
it's a really good look at that cult of personality and how it has feelings of the idea that used to be around, especially for the Manson family, of like hippies being dangerous.
Yeah.
Even though 99% of them were not to disparage it, but kind of peace loving and quite passive and quite almost soft. Not as an insulting way, anyone out there who identifies with that, but he totally goes against that as a character, where spiritually he's really enlightened, or he seems that way. He seems very all about, he talks about he hates violence and stuff, but then there's scenes of him just leathering people, all shredded and ripped, and obviously he's a bank robber. So
I mean, I've never thought about that with the film, but when you said Manson, then he has got almost Manson-esque qualities to him. Like he's very not addictive, but people get drawn in by his energy, and when he's talking about
charismatic.
And I mean, even Johnny Utah, great name, Keanu Reeves' character, kind of falls in love with that side of Bodhi's personality, and I think that's a fight that's going on within like Utah himself. That he's he is an FBI agent, he's trained, he's proficient. But as much as his character pretending to be a lawyer, he's going, oh, I want to break out of my bubble and do this surfing and all this. But then actually,
that
is what actually ends up happening to him, which is, you can definitely see those Manson-esque moments. And then the bit on the beach when they're all feeding into that ego and stuff, and then he has that, Bodhi has that line where he says, what's mine is yours, and it's very sort of,
yeah, we're just an open society, man.
Yeah, man. That's why I tied my hair back specifically for this episode, because I didn't want to get...
Do you know what I love as well? They even reference that idea and that overly cliche idea of like a California surfer dude in the scene where Gary Busey and Keanu Reeves are going around the beach and they get hair samples from people, from other surfer dudes, and they literally walk around going, hey dude, there's something on your hair, man.
Yes.
I think
it's very Pauly Shore, almost that Pauly Shore character that he,
Encino man.
Yeah,
which
is getting a sequel apparently.
Oh god, stick to podcast, Paul. You're good on them. I think people in their mind conflate Keanu memes from Bill and Ted, and then when they think of Point Break, they conflate that with that scene on the beach where he literally goes like, hey dude, to a couple of people. And I think certain people look back and go, oh, is that film where he's like doing Bill and Ted again, but as a cop on the beach? It's like, no, you've really missed the point.
Well, like me, they probably think they've seen it. Like,
yeah.
that's the real issue. I think there's a statistic out there, isn't it? 70% of people who watch Point Break have never seen Point Break.
Well, it's got an element to the end of it. There's a couple of things I want to touch on. One thing, in the build-up to the end, there's a point in the film where you think it's going to end when they're first in the plane, and you think, this is a big finale. And then there's an extra 20 minutes after it.
Yeah.
There's a whole other sequence, there's a whole other sort of parts of the plot. And we spoke about again, when we were rule breaking about talking about the film outside the pod.
We weren't rule breaking socially and COVID.
Oh,
rules.
no.
Just our own self-imposed rules of, no, don't say it. Wait, leave it for the pod.
It's the rabbit hole rule book.
Yeah.
The very end scene on the beach when they're in Australia, which I'm not convinced by the accents by those cops on the beach. I don't think
100% not Australia. The actual beach is the same beach that the football scene from Karate Kid is filmed on. So definitely not in Australia.
And another film that 70% of people say they've seen, but they've probably seen enough scenes of it to know. But that final scene, we were talking about how it you were saying you feel like it feels a little bit tacked on, and it was a little bit like all the hair and all that. And obviously there is a time jump between the end of the film and that. But this time watching it, and I mentioned to you, I've watched it a couple of times since we said we were going to do this.
Yeah,
I watched it once where I literally sat down in a dark room like I like to and just zoned out fully into it. And then one time I watched it in the background while I was doing other bits, just more passive watching. And there were certain things I picked up on almost more because I wasn't fully bought into the story. The good side of that was the ending really reflects the opening scene. It's another piece of that setup. The opening, it's dark and rainy, it's more grey. Keanu's very optimistic and he is like the company man and he's shooting all the targets. And you mentioned how there's that really bit of bad acting, which is quite funny. The guy going like, record time! And it's like almost down the barrel of the camera where you're like, oh... And it cuts to Bodhi, or who we assume is Bodhi, surfing. It's all very dreamlike and very weird and very optimistic. The very end scene, again, raining, sandy beach. Keanu, at this point, isn't much of a company man. And he's also no longer in love with the idea of Bodhi and his cult of personality.
Yeah.
And Bodhi, he's managed to catch him, and Bodhi's almost... he's no longer in control and all this, and then at the very end he lets him go and he's obviously going to die in the waves because there's no way
he would survive the 50-year storm.
But then it's this bittersweet thing of Keanu abandons being the company man, and he clearly has managed to do the thing of breaking out of his shell, and he's not this straight-laced cop or just person that he was. But at the same time, although he's give Bodhi the ending that he wanted, heavy spoiler alerts, but if you've not seen it by now, I don't think you're gonna have. And it doesn't. To be fair, it doesn't. It's not that kind of film. It's not a big, huge twist, but he gives Bodhi the out that he wanted at least, even though he knows he's not going to survive it. And there's something very. I joked before saying it's not as deep as I'm making out, but in some ways it really is. There's a lot more beneath the surface. Yeah,
I think it is deep in a way, but in a very different way to how we talked about the stuff that's going on that people didn't give Starship Troopers the credit for. I think it's deep on a sort of emotional, spiritual sort of level.
Yeah.
I don't mean religious or anything like that. I just mean that you see people falling in love with something that they didn't think they would.
Yeah.
Abandoning who they were, birthing a different version of themselves, and then having to abandon that as well because what they want and the real world don't necessarily line up. And you're right. It did for me. Like when you said, I felt like it was tacked on at the end. I do stand by that, but I don't necessarily mean it in a bad way. I think it looked like it was, months later. Keanu Reeves has got longer hair. He doesn't look older, but he looks like he's lost that sort of that greenness to him.
Yeah, the character's lost a little bit of the sheen and a little bit of the newness.
And I think the film is better for having that bleaker ending. It's almost like the phoenix that they've burnt up, and Keanu can only rise from that sort of situation, which makes me sound way artier than I meant it to. But do you know what I mean? It's such a sort of drip of an end that it's actually, it goes against what you assume Point Break is going to be about. I really, really liked it for that.
Yeah.
But I was sat down going, oh, right, okay, we've got another bit here. Like, what's going on?
It's like the end of the third of Return of the King, the third Lord of the Rings film. That end where there's like 3 or 4 endings,
and you're like,
wow, this is Oh, okay, we got another. And again, I'm not criticising it. Favourite book and film series of all time, arguably the best. But it is, if you're not expecting it, it can be quite jarring to be like, here's the big finale. Oh no, there's a bit more. But again, like you say, the film is better for it. It's very intentionally meant to feel and look different. And like I say, and for me, it's that perfect. It's the bookend of one story. Because I read a few things online of people suggesting, like, you know, obviously at this point, break, it couldn't happen. Obviously, unfortunately, Swayze has passed, and Keanu, as great as he is in John Wick, I don't know if he's going to be up for doing surfing and stuff, because he barely does any in this film. That's something I'll get onto in a minute. Even Swayze don't do that much. There's the idea of like, well, Bodhi could, if anyone could survive it, Bodhi can. He's the ultimate. And the point of the film is that no, he isn't. That's a masquerade, and he as a character probably believes he is the man.
Yeah. Just
like in real life, people believe their own. What's the thing people say now? Live your own truth. Which you're like, but that kind of is how a lot of people kind of live, and not necessarily vindictively so. You can argue Bodhi, he's not a straight up villain. There's definitely a darker side to him, but you can see that he's fighting with that as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on. It's a surfer dude action film with all the flair of Catherine Bigelow's style, but it's all about characters and, like you say, about people re-emerging and changing.
100%. It's about characters. I mean, straight away you look at Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze, and they at the time that they filmed it, they were just like really, really poster boy, like cool guys, like these guys. Like, I mean, if you didn't want to be Keanu Reeves, you wanted to be Patrick Swayze, and if the girl didn't want to go out with Patrick Swayze, she would have wanted to go out with Keanu Reeves. But I think it's so much more than just those two, like good-looking, charismatic guys. The characters that they are portraying are just really interesting guys. It's actually funny because I've got some alternative castings here for it.
Oh gosh, okay, go on.
So Johnny Utah.
Yeah.
Swayze actually auditioned for him originally.
Really?
Yeah,
right,
but then after he read the script, went back to him and said, actually, I think I'd be more interested in playing the Bodhi character. But before Keanu Reeves was cast, Johnny Depp was offered the part.
Okay.
I can kind of see it.
You can see it, yeah.
Charlie Sheen.
All right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, in his day, he had some chops.
Matthew Broderick.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I mean, his career's gone a very different way.
Yeah.
Like I don't.
The Johnny
know.
Depp I get, and Swayze I could actually see more in Gary Busey's role than Keanu's.
Oh, that would have been good. That.
Yeah, less potentially less over the top. Might have been a little bit less comedic, but I could see him more as this is something he has in his films. He has a presence, even in when he was younger in certain roles, and arguably less good roles. He always has a very commanding presence. Yeah. As in, he is the alpha or the mentor, and that's kind of what this film's all about. So I think for him to be the rookie or the new guy, despite how competent, because this is the side of it. It's not even your typical Keanu's the new guy, and he's rubbish because of it. Because it's like he's not the one of the big iconic scenes that you say where he's rolling, he shoots in the air and he misses. They all know him as we know that's on purpose. You don't miss. He's the alpha in terms of he's like the soldier.
Yeah. He's
the marksman. He's like he can run. He can do the running. He can do the fighting. He can do the shooting. He's got the technical skills to be this, FBI agent down to a T. But Swayze just has this grittiness where you're like, no, he's Busey. And even if he was as wild as Busey, that would have been quite an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, I think they would have gone in a very different way, and maybe they would have hyped up those scenes more, that they would have given more time and more fleshed out. When I read that Swayze had auditioned for Utah, it made me kind of imagine that the same way that Tom Hiddleston auditioned originally for Thor, that a lot of people we've got a big meaty scene here that's around the main character. We'll get every prospective actor in that we want to see who could possibly be in this movie. And regardless of what role we're thinking you're for, this is the bit of the script we've got. So, go for it, sort of thing. Yeah. I've got some alternative names. So apparently it was originally going to be called Johnny Utah, which it's a great character name, but it really diminishes, Gary Busey's supporting role. But it almost makes like, is Bodhi in that film? Like,
and
because it's definitely a two-hander, isn't it? Like, it's
and Johnny Utah as a name, as a part of a title, it sounds like a weird sci-fi kind of, I don't know, it has almost like a comedic tone to it, which the film Point Break does, but Point Break is a much better title.
Well, Keanu Reeves plays Johnny Mnemonic, doesn't he? In Johnny Mnemonic, so it's kind of like Johnny Utah, Johnny Five. What? How many of these films are we doing here? And then
Johnny Anderson in The Matrix.
Mr. Anderson. It was also called Riders of the Storm until halfway through production.
So was that the working title, or was that actually what it was going to be released as?
It's what it was going to be released as, but then they realised, they already knew what the script was.
They didn't have the rights to the music.
That even though it was technically right, because it was Riders of the Storm and Swayze's talking about the 50-year storm, everything else that's in that song has nothing to do with the movie or anything else that's in the song. So it's like, that doesn't really work.
It's not a bad title.
I think it's a good title, but I think because the song's so famous, if it doesn't then not match up with it, and I don't even think it's a great song, but it doesn't have that sort of surfer beach sort of feel to it. Maybe it would have worked better if it stuck with the original sport they were going to use, which was skateboarding. Mate, I love skateboarding. I can't surf because I've never tried it. So straight away off the bat, unless I've just inherited the ability to do it, or I've learned it through osmosis or something, I won't be able to do it. I can imagine Patrick Swayze being a surfer. I couldn't imagine him being a skateboarder. It's got a very different feel. A very different feel to it. The whole movie would have to change, or would have changed, to become surfing, because obviously they're doing the bank robbing. They're robbing the banks.
Yeah.
Through the surf season.
Yeah.
Well, there is no skateboarding season, so that is a big, it's a big thing in the movie.
I wonder what the original version of that was then, or if they didn't get that far in, where they just went.
I kind of think it's almost like with the Back to the Future thing, where they were talking like, it was a fridge at first, and then the idea being like, wait a second, we don't want kids getting in fridges because they can't get back out, and that's a bit dangerous.
Yeah.
Just
let them get in DeLoreans and drive down the road as fast as they can instead.
Yeah, only 88 miles an hour, mate. That's, they don't need to go any faster than that.
I can see a version of it as skateboarders. The two things. One, I think at 1991, and you'd assume this was going into pre-production at like 88, 89 latest. Films obviously used to take at least a couple of years from start to finish. Things can move a bit quicker now, obviously. I feel like skateboarding was very new in pop culture at that point still.
Yeah.
So I imagine Swayze as a skateboarder would even be a harder sell, because I don't know how old he is at this point, but he's late 20s, 30s, maybe touching his 40s. I'm equally comfortable saying he's 25 or 45, and that's not a bad thing. He looks great.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have that look, especially at that point.
Yeah.
Which I think would have been a harder sell.
I think surfing's already, at this point, and fast forward to today, it's established itself as it might not be necessarily a mainstream sport that people watch week in, week out, but we assume that it's going to be around for a long time. It's well established, and I suppose in 1991, was skateboarding really on par with something that's been proven decades old, like.
And it also feels, in my mind, it seems like a more comedic version, way more parody, or way more subverting expectations, however you want to approach it. I think it'd have a lot less of the... Because one of the things Bigelow does perfectly in this film, talk about going against conventions, there's a sometimes jarring transition between scenes of... It almost feels like B-roll of surfing footage, and it's all dreamlike and weird and slow motion and shutter frame, and then you cut to these almost extreme close-ups of these dialogue scenes where Keanu and Gary Busey are shouting at the commander and he's shouting back, and they're arguing in an office, and it's all very comedic, almost improvised feeling sometimes, very intense.
I take the skin off my chicken. I even take the skin off my chicken. Great line.
And then you cut to these action scenes where it's almost documentary-like. It's all handheld and shaky. It's gritty, and you feel yourself going like, oh, Keanu's getting his face put in a lawnmower, and you're like, oh my god, and he really is, and you're like, oh, this is too much. There's this very, and I think if you went from that to, sometime in the half pipe, it might be too jarring.
Yeah, I think straight away looking at them though, you can almost see and feel the spiritual side of surfing, which I don't think. I'm not saying that you don't get that from skateboarding. You'd probably argue, people like Tony Hawk and stuff, that they themselves have got such an emotional connection to it.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at it as a
general audience having to buy into it.
Yeah. Because you're connected with with the ocean, and there's always that spiritual side to the ocean. So I think it rolls into Bodhi's character. I think Bodhi would have to be a completely different character almost in that to make skateboarding the thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I didn't think we were going to talk that much about this. I thought it was going to be a different sport, skateboarding. Move on. But yeah.
So you've reached the point break in the episode.
Yeah. I mean, it was inevitable this was going to happen. If we can talk for 2 episodes on Starship Troopers, it was definitely going to happen on Point Break as well. I mean, should we even try and keep them to 1 episode at a time, or let's just see what happens?
Radical.
Yeah, if you liked part 1 of our Point Break episode, please join us in part 2, where we talk more Point Break.
Anything else to add, Charlie?
Yeah, guys, remember, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Bye.
Bye.